Thank you. I'd like to call the Assembly Committee on Revenue to order. Will the Secretary please take roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Ortlicker.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chair Cohen.
Thank you. And I am here. Everyone is present, so we have a forum. I'd like to welcome everyone watching or listening over the internet to this virtual meeting. Our meetings for the time being will be held in this format only, and they're regularly scheduled for 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Before we begin, I'll go through some housekeeping. Members and presenters, please silence your electronic devices. Courtesy and respect is always required in these meetings, and then additionally in dealing with members and staff before or after meetings. Committee members will be using laptops and multiple screens and devices to participate in the meeting virtually and then also to view exhibits. Due to that, you may see members looking around on multiple screens or hard copy printouts. Please don't take that as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We're just trying to navigate in this virtual world with these virtual committee meetings. As a reminder, and as is stated on our agenda, we'll have public comment at the end of the meeting and may be limited in duration. Details on how to participate during public comment are available on Nellis, which you can get to on the legislature's website. Persons who wish to provide testimony or attend the meeting virtually must pre-register online at the Nellis website. Registration opens when an agenda is posted to the legislature's website. And upon successful registration, registrants will receive a telephone number, meeting ID, and instructions for joining the meeting. As a reminder, pursuant to rule number 54 of the Assembly Standing Rules, the definition of support for testimony is approval of the measure as written or approval of the measure as written along with proposed amendments that have been approved by the sponsor of the measure. Opposition to a bill or resolution is construed as not supporting the measure as written or opposing the measure as revised by an amendment that has not been approved by the sponsor of the measure. And neutral is when the person who's testifying is offering particular insight on the measure but expresses no opinion on the measure either way. So as an example, you can love a bill and want it to pass and think it's great, but think there's a little slight thing that needs to be changed. And if your amendment has not been accepted by the sponsor, you must testify in opposition. But you can certainly share with us that you love the bill and just want that little tweak to be made. So also please note that everyone on the video is a presenter, a member of the assembly, or staff. This may change in the future, but for the sake of fairness for now, support, opposition, and neutral testimony will be taken on the phone. So with that, we'll now move on to our presentations. For the public, you can see exhibits, most of the exhibits brought by the presenters on Nellis. And then for the members, as a reminder, Director Brown detailed the differences between abatements and tax credits in his presentation on February 9th, if you'd like to refresh yourself on the differences between those two. With that, I will start the presentation on AB 20, which revises provisions relating to transferable tax credits for film and other productions, and ask Executive Director of GOED, Michael Brown, to go ahead and introduce the presentation, and your team will be presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. when I became GOED director, I didn't know a lot about the film division and have come to learn more as director. But one of the first things I also challenged all of my staff is I said, GOED was 10 years old, and some of these programs were even older. I said, I'd like you to look at our statutes and see what might need updated so that we could take 10 years of experience in the legislature. We have placed a high standard of compliance. James Hum, who's handling our legislative affairs, is actually the compliance officer at GOED, who came over from Attorney General Ford's office at Bryn Gibson's request a month before I arrived at GOED to strengthen a variety of our compliance programs. The film division, I'm going to let Eric walk through the bill. I'll tell you the main issue here, though, is that these are transferable tax credits. So these are tax credits given to production companies that then can be sold to other parties. And when that legislation was put together many years ago, there was a list of non-qualified activities, and it included sports. And of course, Las Vegas has changed. We now have a sports economy there, and we have sports teams there. But we were starting to get just numerous requests about projects that weren't the actual competition, but were related to the sporting event. And I don't want to color outside the lines on these things. Transferable tax credits do not rise to the level of the GOED board for final approval. So it ultimately rests with Eric and myself to make the decision. And frankly, we had just reached a point where we just don't know what to do in this space because clearly the legislature sent a strong signal when they wrote this bill originally. And Eric will detail that in more detail. The draft you have in front of you is a conservative version, but this is not anything we're wedded to. We need policy guidance in this area from the revenue committees with respect to how they wish these to be treated. And with that, I'll turn it to my colleague, Eric, who's also a CPA, and I'm really pleased to have him on our team.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Director Brown. Chairwoman Cohen and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of AB 20. For the record, my name is Eric Price, and I am the director of the Nevada Film Office that is housed in the Nevada's Governor's Office of Economic Development. I'm here today with my colleagues, Executive Director Michael Brown, Kim Spurgeon, the Film Office Analyst, and James Hum, our Director of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs. A quick background on the Nevada Film Office. Since 1983, the Nevada Film Office has facilitated the creation of content in Nevada, drawing global attention to the state's businesses, individuals, iconic locations, resulting in job creation, small business diversification, and driving our tourism economy. The content creation media industry drives attention to Nevada that has resulted in widespread economic development and tourism as economic development. Before turning to the bill, I'd like to provide some additional background on the program itself. The Transferable Tax Credits for Film and Other Productions program was passed by the state legislature in 2013 and went into effect on January 1, 2014. It is intended to incentivize production companies to film and create content in Nevada that directly results in the creation of high-quality local jobs and an injection of millions of dollars into the local economy, all while furthering the promotion of Nevada as a destination to the world. Having administered this program for 7 years, I am bringing AB 20 before you today in an effort to improve the law to reflect the best practices for the state and to align them with industry standards based on our experience. The bill seeks to further clarify certain aspects of the program to reflect the office's working and functional interpretation. It is primarily a housekeeping bill to properly reflect the best practices for the program. Turning to bill itself, Section 1 addresses the types of productions that can qualify for the program. Interstitial television programming and interstitial advertisements have been removed as qualified productions, as their inclusion is redundant and inconsistent with industry terminology. The section also clarifies that an episode of a series can qualify for a tax credit and removes the limitation of a minimum number of episodes for a reality show. Due to the rise and influence of sports in Nevada, the definition of a sporting event has been further articulated. Similar clarification was intended when adding pageants to award shows and galas as excluded production types. The law currently states that the office shall approve an application that meets the specified requirements. Section 2 of the bill updates the language from shall approve to may approve, which would allow the office to prioritize productions in the best interest of the state. It also extends the allowable time to complete the required audit from 90 days to 270 days, which is more consistent with the actual time frame required for an auditor to complete the work. The requirement of a Nevada business address to be included on the application has been removed, and as a production will typically apply before they've established that address. In this section, we're also proposing an amendment to Section 2 that would require productions to include an acknowledgement at the end of the screen credits that the production was filmed in Nevada by including the Nevada Film Office logo. This would raise awareness in the industry that Nevada is a premier destination to film content and encourage other productions to pursue filming opportunities in Nevada. Section 3 of the bill removes the requirement that the application must be submitted before any qualified costs can be incurred, and instead allows qualified costs to be incurred during a defined qualified period. This section also addresses the manner in which a Nevada business can acquire tangible personal property for the benefit of a qualified production. This subsection was initially intended to prevent pass-through benefits to non-Nevada businesses, but it also unintentionally prevented Nevada businesses from growing their inventory. This change allows Nevada businesses to grow their inventories to accommodate bigger productions while still preventing pass-through benefits to non-Nevada businesses. This section also addresses tangible personal property acquired as an asset by the production company, allowing our office to limit the amount of the asset that can qualify through adopted regulations. Similar limitations are employed by other film tax credit programs to prevent incentive dollars from going toward large asset purchases. Section 4 of the bill allows the office to withhold credits to productions who are found to be in violation of laws or who attempt fraud. It expands the protections already in place to ensure that no tax incentive credits are awarded to unwarranted productions. In summary, while this is primarily a cleanup bill, these changes will make needed improvements to the program's functionality. I appreciate the time and welcome any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you. We do have questions. So far, I have questions from Assemblywoman Considine, Assemblywoman Anderson, and Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. So if anyone else has questions, please go ahead and let me know. And we'll start with Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions. One of them is just to make sure that I'm clear. So you mentioned the sporting event, and that on page 3 of the bill. Currently, sporting events and the additional language, sports, pre-shows, post-shows, are not qualified productions, correct? And then is there anything in here, like follow down to where Section 2 says that you may approve an application? Would that open the door to allowing any of those non-qualified productions to become a qualified production?
It does not. The NRS specifically states what is not a qualified production. So the subsequent change from shall to may would not in any way override productions that are specifically excluded from qualifying.
Okay, thank you. And then, Chair, if I may ask a second question.
Please go ahead.
So on the bill explanation with the transferable tax credits, I was adding up the tax credits, the 15% and then the 12% and then the 5% for above the line folks not in Nevada and the 5% below. Does that mean that a production can essentially add up to 30%, obtain 37% of the available transferable tax credits, like almost a third of their production tax credits, they can get them in the aggregate?
Most that a production can qualify for, the maximum allowable tax credit is 25%, and that is calculated as 15% is the base rate plus 5% bonus if your crew are more than 50% Nevada residents, and another 5% bonus if your production is filmed in a more rural area of Nevada, about approximately outside of Clark County, for a total of 25%. The 12% rate is in lieu of the 15%. So if you are a Nevada resident, you could qualify for 15%. If you are a non-Nevada above the line talent coming into Nevada, they can only qualify at a 12%. So the maximum rate that anybody could qualify with all the bonuses added together would be 25. And if everyone was above the line coming in, it would be 22%. So the maximum is 25.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation.
Okay, with that, we have a question from Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and thank you all for the presentation and also for the meeting that you all gave me so much time today, because I had a lot of questions, so I really appreciated the education that you all provided for me earlier. My question actually was something that we had discussed, and so I wanted to bring up also for everybody else. It's on page 4. It is, it's E, section E, with the incredible increase. I mean, 3 times as much time. That's a pretty lengthy time frame. And so my concern had to do with, first of all, it being 3 times as much time. Then also, how does that impact the calendar? Because it kind of makes that wonky time frame. So if you could walk us through how that would also impact the 10 million max in transferable tax that can be used for a year if possible.
Thank you very much for the question. So this requirement changes the amount of time in which the audit can be completed. It was originally 90. We are proposing to change it to 270. I happen to be a CPA and have been for 20 plus years. And in working with the productions, once a production is completed, they will take all the information and send it to their outside CPA, which is a requirement in Nevada, to audit that production to ensure that the costs are correct and accurate based on our law. That procedure can take a lot of time, depending on the books and records of the company and how organized they are. It can take some time. The procedures themselves takes time. The CPAs can be very busy. And there's a limited number of CPAs that are approved through our program. Also, because of the nature of productions, sometimes they are complete. They go to edit the footage, to create the content, and they need to come back and do reshoots in Nevada to make sure they get that additional footage. By increasing the time frame, we are allowing all those costs to accurately get captured. So that the audit is as accurate as possible. You know, when this process is all said and done, we want to make sure that the accuracy is there, that the compliance is there, and the artificial subjective 90-day time frame was proven to be too short. So we wanted to make sure that these are as accurate as possible, allowing the CPAs, the productions, their accountants, their attorneys, whoever is involved, to make sure that they can be done accurately. Also, when a production, on the second part of your question, when a production applies for the incentive, we then take the money that they apply for and allocate it to that production. So it is in effect set aside for them. So the extension of days available is not going to affect that calculation in any way. And lastly, it actually gives us a little more time to process that. 90 days was just proving to be too short of a time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I have a question from Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Having issues with unmuting. Well, my colleagues did a good job because I had a couple of questions, but then one of my colleagues brought up a question that I didn't know I had. So let me start with, I'm going to piggyback off Assemblywoman Constantine. You had, when you broke that up into the 15% base plus a 15% bonus for using Nevada talent, and then you said 5%, not 15, and then 5% for filming. I believe you initially said rules, but then you clarified it with outside of Clark County. So does that mean if you film in Reno that you would get that 5% deduction? And then I have one more quick question.
Yes, definitely. In Reno, they do qualify for the 5% bonus.
Okay. And then my other question, and it's more, when you removed the business address and the production company, I understand that a lot of these applications would be in first, but I just wonder if that would push them to not actually set up an office here and try to do sort of more unconventional things. So I was just wondering if we might want to put in there at some, they don't have to have their physical address in Nevada before, but at some point they might want to update that so we know that they've actually have a production company within the state of Nevada. I would hate for us to lose that revenue.
They definitely do set up an office here in Nevada. All that we're saying here is at the time of the application that they don't need to have that business address, but that when they do film here, that they typically will set up that production office, that they just don't have to have it at the time of application.
And if I may really quickly, Chair.
Please go ahead. However, let me first, I've been remiss and I haven't reminded speakers, please make sure and reintroduce yourself. Your names alone is fine, just for the sake of the secretaries when they have to transcribe the meeting later on. But please go ahead, Assemblywoman.
Thank you. And I just, once again, I just would hate for us to lose any revenue on this. So I wish we could get some verbiage in here to say, but please update once you do have the Nevada address. So they understand that is, we want them to have a production office here and that'll help drive revenue as well.
The law currently does not require them to have a Nevada business license or to set up a Nevada business to produce content in Nevada. For an example, Sony Motion Pictures may come here to film a movie. They won't necessarily set up a business in Nevada to film that movie, but they will set up a production office during the production of the film. So this change would not affect business license revenue in any way. It's merely stating that when the application is completed, they do not have to have that they don't not have to know that location during the application process. But when they do come and start filming, at that point, they will have to know what that address is.
I just feel like that should be stated in the law since we're striking the other word. So I'll leave it at that. And that was Eric Price for the record.
I apologize. Eric Price, Director of the Nevada Film Office.
Thank you, Director. And just your name is fine. With that, I have a question from Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if you'll indulge, I do have two questions. One is a follow-up to my colleague regarding the physical location. And actually, let me just say, it basically ditto to what she said. And I appreciate those comments. The first question that I have is that in your presentation, you mentioned the economic impact and the benefits to the state of Nevada for these tax credits. Is there a quantitative figure that you have that shows what the benefit is in relation to the tax credit?
Yes. Per the NRS, the film office and through GOED is required to prepare an annual report regarding the film tax incentive program and the productions that have applied. So that is an annual report that we prepare every year, and I believe is due on October 17th annually. And we can provide that report to anyone who would like to have it.
Yeah, I would. Prior to having a workshop on this, I would like to see those numbers, just so we can ensure that we're getting the economic benefit versus the tax credits. And then the second question, and Madam Chair, I appreciate you indulging me on the questions. is back to what my colleague was saying regarding removing the physical address portion. Is there I know you said typically they form an office after they file the application and are about to produce. Is there anything in here though that requires that? I tried to quickly look after the question was asked, but I didn't see that was an actual requirement. And the reason that I'm asking is for obviously, taxes, property taxes, commerce tax, et cetera, once they have a physical address. So I'm just curious if it was in here and I'm just missing it.
Sure. Eric Price from the Film Office. There is currently no requirement for a company to produce content in Nevada to set up a business in Nevada. It is not a requirement of the NRS. So that would be something that would have to be added because it is currently not a requirement.
Madam Chair, can I have a follow-up there?
Please go ahead.
Real brief. I thought that it was, and this may be for legal, I thought there was a requirement in the state of Nevada if you're going to be doing business to actually have a business license and an established business in the state. Is that not the case for the film industry?
Kim Spurgeon from the Film Office. I can answer that question. Typically, when a production comes to film, they will apply for a film permit, and that film permit allows them to operate and in the state that way. So some film permits they do have to pay for in that way, but it's not licensed in that same way that a typical permanent business would be, due to the nature of filming productions. They're temporary. So they get those temporary permits issued through the various jurisdictions throughout the state as opposed to a permanent business license.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Next, we have questions from Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And two brief questions, if I may, and one to follow up on a question by my colleague, Northern Nevada and Sparks, regarding the extension of the audits. You basically talked about the 270 days, but I also see you added language to allow an extension to an additional 90 days. Am I reading that correct? So that would almost take it to a year?
Correct.
And so maybe I missed it when you explained it. So you already extended to the 270 days. What would necessitate an additional 90-day extension?
Eric Price from the Film Office. We've had productions in the past that, again, production is a very unique business in itself. It is not predictable. There are times when reshoots need to be made. When an actor is actually pulled from a production and all the scenes need to be refilmed. So we wanted to give ourselves and the productions themselves the ability to do that effectively without restricting them to an arbitrary time frame, by creating 270-day and then giving ourselves a little leeway for extenuating circumstances, as they become necessary.
Okay. So in essence, we could extend it up to 4 times what we're doing now, which I understand. And my follow-up question, or another question, Madam Chair, is on you're adding a number of events to clean up, and you kind of explain, with the sporting industry and some of the driving forces behind that. I'm just curious why pageants were specifically added to this list.
Thank you for the question, Eric Price from the Nevada Film Office. The language is originally written, included a gala or awards show. The addition of pageant was simply to provide more clarity to help us administer the program more effectively. As the administrators of the program, we're just trying to execute the legislative intent. Gala and award shows were vague terms. The including of pageants was to merely just try to be as accurate as possible given the questions that we've had through our experience in the past.
Just a quick follow-up. So were pageants given tax credits previously?
Eric Price from the film office, they were not. And so
Okay.
we were just trying to put that consistency into the language.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a question or questions from Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple. I hope they'll be quick. In section 1, I see we're deleting interstitial television programming, interstitial advertising. Just wondered what that is. I just not familiar with that term.
And neither is anybody. That's why that is why we're removing it. These were some, I think, terms that were used very early on in the past. They're not common industry terms. They have never been addressed. No one has ever tried to apply for one, or most people ask that same exact question. So we were trying to take it out to provide clarity, as we didn't see any benefit of it being there.
Thank you. You know, you're definitely going to get an application now in the next month that asks for an approval of something interstitial, and we'll be back here talking about it. Thank you, Madam Chair. The other question I had, it kind of is along the lines of my colleague, Assemblyman Roberts. He had asked about adding pageant to the list of exclusions, and up there in page 3, sub E, it talks about really amplifying the definition of sporting event to include, sportscast, pre-show, sports show. And I just wondered if you could maybe just talk about a little bit of the I guess, decision to amplify that definition and why you believe that better reflects what the intent of the original bill was.
Thank you, Eric Price from the film office. We had a little bit of a technical glitch there, but I do think I understood your question. So if I didn't, that might be why. The additional language there was, if we look at the terms not included or the productions not included, in 2A, we say news, weather, current events program, and then we go on to all the way down to E, where we say sporting event. Again, this is one of the ones where in the language, we specifically excluded news and current events, and then separately sporting events. But then we were getting productions that were considering applying that were kind of news sport shows that were, around sporting events, the show before the show and the show right after the show, where they talked about the event itself. And so those kind of blurred the lines. Were they current programs about sporting events, both of which would have been excluded? So again, just to try to clarify the legislative intent and to be, better administrators of the program, we were looking to get some more language that clearly defined what we were seeing here in the statute as non-qualifying productions, whether they were sports events or news events. Some of these pre-shows and post-shows kind of fell into both of those categories as excluded, and we wanted to try to clarify that based on the experience that we've had administering the program.
And Michael Brown, go ahead, Executive Director of the Record. Again, this is a new phenomenon as Las Vegas is becoming a sports capital, and as these issues were forming up, we simply did not know what to do with those kinds of applications. Then the pandemic hit, and the issue became moot because those kinds of things weren't occurring. And I said, we need to take this to the legislature, and we need to get guidance. This wasn't written by the finger of God, but it does say shall not, or doesn't it not? And so, I don't think we have a strong position either way. Obviously, getting big production movies and television series, are important. And as transferable tax credit, there's a finite amount of them. And so we want to make sure that, they're deployed with the greatest possible return. But this is the Revenue Committee, and we welcome your input on this.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Could maybe either of you, Director Price or Director Brown, can you just tell us why you would want one show or entertainment event over another? Like why a reality show but not a sports show? Why why are some making the cuts and some isn't? What is the benefit to the state with the difference?
Eric Price, Director of the Film Office. Again, the bill was written in 2013. we were not participating in writing the bill at that time. Again, we're just trying to clarify what the intent was as the administrators of it. However, my assumption would be that there is a limited amount of tax credits in the state of Nevada. Currently, we have 10 million available per year, and certain types of content are going to get a broader reach and generate more attention to the state of Nevada over a longer term period of time than other types of content. And so certain television shows that have a longer shelf life would over the longer term draw more attention to Nevada and drive more tourism to the Nevada. So I believe that it was, certain types of these programs don't just generate that much, as well as the nature of the productions and how many jobs they create and the amount of economic activity that they create. Traditional television shows and films and other types of productions have shown in the past to generate larger employment and larger spend in Nevada than the brief type newscasts and current event shows that don't generate as much employment per production.
Thank you for that, Director Price. With that, we have a question from Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings. Good to see you again, Director Priest.
Hey.
You guys have always been friendly to me when I've come into the film office and helped me with outreach to young people and all of that stuff with T-shirts and everything. So thank you. My question here is in Section 1 of the bill here, and I see where we are pretty much expanding. It looks to me like we're expanding what is included in as a qualified project. So it looks like we're removing the $500,000 threshold per episode. So a project can come here and shoot one episode without meeting that 500,000 threshold, correct?
Eric Price from the Film Office. Actually, what we've done is the $500,000 threshold still remains, but we added that it can be one episode of a show instead of the whole series. For example, if someone wants to film a pilot to a new show and that pilot meets all the criteria, we still would like to see if they could film that pilot here. They don't necessarily need to film the whole series as long as the pilot itself meets the existing criteria. So that criteria has not changed.
Okay. May I have a follow-up, Chair?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Have we had any conversations about that, about lowering that threshold or allowing some of the smaller guys, maybe even exclusively to our state, to be able to collectively put projects together to qualify for that threshold, to meet that threshold, and possibly benefit from the tax credit?
Eric Price from the Film Office. We have not had any of those conversations. Are open to those conversations if people would like to have them, but we have not discussed that or added any language in the bill to address it.
Okay, thank you. I as an independent filmmaker who would look to making, taking advantage of some of our tax credits here in the state locally, I think it would be advantageous for us to, even in spurring the industry here, to look at creating a situation where our local producers can also take advantage of this, and it's not so focused on our Sonys and MGMs and major producers. So thank you, Chair.
Got a question or questions from Assemblyman O'Neill?
Madam Chair, you took my question because I like sports shows. So, but I do have one question, if I may. Ms. Price, you said in your presentation, if I understood you correctly, that you're going to now require shows that do get tax credits at the end to say that the episode was filmed with the assistance of the tax credit or with the GOED, assistance from GOED. I can't find it in the bill. Could you tell me where that is, or did I misunderstand you?
It was added to the bill, and it is currently in section K of subsection K of section 2.
Assemblyman O'Neill, there was an amendment.
Oh,
It's in the amendment.
okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Did you have any other questions?
Like I said, Madam Chair, you took my question about the sports shows.
Well, while we're here talking about the amendment, Dr. Price, can you tell us the term "produced" that's used in the amendment? Is that what does that mean? Is that something that anyone in the industry? I mean, we all know what "produced" means, but is there a specific definition for the industry?
Eric Price, I want to make sure I'm accurately answering your question, but I don't know if I understand exactly where it is.
Okay, just a second. Where the logo, where the logo is discussed. So that is in, I think it was section 3 of the amendment. Yeah.
I see it here in section 3, subsection K, an agreement to include the state logo provided by the Nevada Film Office in the end screen credits indicating the production was filmed in Nevada. If the production does not include end screen credits, then an alternative acknowledgement to the state of Nevada within the final production shall be made.
Right. So with the use, so produced or production is the proper word, I guess, in the language, but is there a set within the industry? Is there a set usage of production? This production was made in Nevada, that means something?
I don't know that there was a standard in the industry. I do know that most other programs that offer incentives to films do have a logo requirement. So we were adding that to the end, which allows us just to get more of our acknowledgement on the screen, and then also potentially within databases like IMDb and others, by having that in there, gets Nevada into that for future reference as data gets collected around productions, where you officially have our logo in there for that.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. I didn't even think about IMDb being something that the state where the filming was done would be included in IMDb. But okay, with that, go to a question. Well, I guess, I don't know, sticking with that, looking at, I just want to go back to that. At the end of the last paragraph in section 1 of section 3, line 27, that just to be clear, I'm talking about that word "produced," or, not the logo so much, just that I just want to know if there's an actual industry standard for that word.
I don't know. I do not believe that there is. And Kim Spurgeon, our film office analyst, may be able to add to this if she understands it differently.
Yes, Kim Spurgeon here for the record. I think I know what you're asking, and yes, production is an industry standard term. Anyone who applies for this program is considered a production. So it's just kind of a general term, as opposed to delineating it out to a TV series, a feature film, commercial. They are all together considered a production, and that is an industry standard term.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to have an idea of how you're going to administer the term going with the logo. But Okay, so with that, I have a question from Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. So one of the great things about GoEd is that I think in every piece of legislation we've written over the past decade, we require an annual report or biannual report. And so I was actually looking for a couple of the reports, and there's so many of them that I got myself turned around. So I'm going to ask you questions about information that's out there, but my apologies because I know I can just research it, but it might be quicker to do it this way. And so I was wondering about the trend in the usage of the transferable tax credits. And so I could see the the most recent report and saw that it was about 1.5 million in 2019 and about 1.6 million in 2020. And I'm just wondering if those numbers over the last biennium are kind of reflective of what the actual allocation of transferable tax credits have been.
So thank you. This is Eric Price from the Film Office. I want to make sure I understand your question correctly. We are allocated approximately 10 million in tax credits per year for the program. Annually, we produce a report through GoEd that shows the amount of the tax credits that were taken, that were awarded that year, the production spend on that for those credits, and other economic data on those credits. So I want to say it's been approximately 5 to 7 million per year in tax credits that have been awarded annually. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it's kind of been a pretty steady trend for that. I want to recall that maybe we had more variations in the usage of the tax credit, but I know I might not remember accurately, but you would say closer to between 5 to 7 million is the actual what's been awarded.
And yes, Eric Price, and I will also ask Kim to jump in if she can correct my numbers. But the production business is unlike most businesses. There's not a lot of predictability to it. One year we might get a very large production, and the next year a couple of small productions. So it has a unique business cycle of when content is created. So it's really hard to graph out in a predictable way.
Okay. If I could have a follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
The thing about tax credits and the way that they're tricky is we never know, as they say, when they're going to hit the sheets, right? So, the timing between when a project starts, a project ends, an audit happens, and they get the certificate of the tax credit. And typically the trend has been that the end receiver of that tax credit immediately takes it to puts it out there to collect it and redeem it. But it's always hard for us on our side to know when that, $5 to $7 million is going to come due, and when it kind of, as we say, comes off the sheets, is no longer income that we can count for Nevada. So I guess, should I have concerns about the fact that if we're increasing the amount of time for the audit to be done to 270 days, and then there's 90 days for the audit certificate to be produced, that we're getting potentially a separate calendar year in which those tax credits might hit? So I'm thinking of a production that begins at the last of this biennium year, and then that being redeemed in another budget cycle.
Eric Price from the Film Office. These are excellent questions. The timing is always difficult to predict. Productions have different lengths of time. We do have from the time they submit the application to the time they start principal photography, that they have 18 months to complete principal photography, and then so many months now to complete the audit. So typically, because of the length of the productions, they will typically fall in the following fiscal year or even the next fiscal, depending on the size of the production. They vary so greatly in their size and complexity that they typically definitely will most likely not be redeemed in the same year that they are applied for and awarded. It is definitely a 1 to 2 year process.
Okay, so we already kind of have that dynamic right now. We're not introducing anything new. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, I have another question from Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. And it kind of continues on with the line of questioning that Assemblymember Benitez Thompson was bringing up of the 10 million in transferable tax credits. And again, we talked about this this afternoon, excuse me. How long do those tax credits carry over if they're unused? And how much is there currently unused that we might have to be held accountable for that time frame?
Thank you for the question, Eric Price from the Film Office. We are allocated 10 million per year in tax credits. If those tax credits are not used, the remainder will roll over for 2 years, a 2-year rollover. And then after that, they will begin to drop off. Currently, we have approximately 25 million in tax credits available because of our annual allocations, less what's being used and what has dropped off has left us now with 25 million available.
Yes, and Michael Brown, Director, go ahead for the record. I'm not sure we have visibility as to how that actually is managed at the macro level with the state, but I know we get periodic inquiries from Legislative Council Bureau as they're getting ready for the Economic Forum to factor those matters into projections.
Yes, Eric Price, to echo that, we typically coordinate that effort with them so that they are always aware and can use that data to budget effectively.
Thank you.
And Assemblywoman Considine, do you have another question as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just somewhat in the same line of all these questions. So how does Nevada's tax credit system and the rollovers, how does it compare to other states that are competing for the same films and productions? Where do we fall among all of those states?
There's Eric Price from the Film Office. Excellent question and a little bit of a complex question. There's currently approximately 43 states that offer film tax incentives and even more countries around the world that offer film tax incentives. They vary greatly in the type of tax incentive that is offered, whether they are transferable tax credits, whether they are cash rebates, whether they are refundable tax credits. They vary anywhere from a state like Georgia, who has a 30% tax credit with an unlimited amount of available credits to be awarded. I believe last fiscal year, they awarded over 900 million in tax credits. Programs like California, which offer a 25% tax incentive and have a cap of about 330 million per year. States like New York that have a 420 million program that offer 25 to 30% tax credits. So they vary greatly throughout the country and throughout the world of different sizes and different types of credits.
So
I hope that answers your question.
If I can ask a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Please go ahead.
So then are we constantly reviewing our system to see how it does compare? And I know it's very hard to compare the states that you mentioned, I believe all of income tax, which is something that we probably have to factor into allowing all of these credits. But I just want to make sure, Nevada is incredibly competitive just because we're Nevada, but that we're looking at this and we are trying to find our area where we can be competitive.
Let me just say, Michael Brown from Go Ahead. It's one of the reasons that I asked Eric to bring forward some legislation so we could actually have this kind of informed discussion. and educate the committee, particularly the Revenue Committee. When I was appointed Go-Ahead Director, there were concerns across the board about the use of abatements and incentives and transferable tax credits. And so whenever I get to an issue that is outside the line, I wanted to bring it back during this session for a discussion. Where we struggle in Nevada is having an adequate production studio that keeps us from being competitive. It's a major infrastructure gap, despite being the entertainment capital of the world in gaming and in theater and in shows and cirque and everything. We actually don't have the kind of facility that's needed built in Las Vegas for these kinds of productions, despite our close proximity to California.
Thank you. That would be a discussion I would like to continue at some other point.
Michael Brown, for the record, we've identified that in the economic plan as an infrastructure gap, because we believe that with the advent of the streaming companies, that there's more content, as Eric has explained to me, being produced now than ever before. And that, now it's a typical, I think Friends was 9 seasons or 10 seasons. Now it's like a fixed 26 shows, 3 years, done, move on to the next show. There's a lot of change coming in this sector. And so it's useful to begin to credential these issues with you today, because this world is evolving. It's evolving fast.
Okay, thank you, Director. I have some more questions, but first let me see if any other of the committee members have questions. Okay. Seeing none, let me start on mine. So I guess I'll start with the audit. So in section 4, there's reference made to the audit, and when we met, we discussed whether there needed to be a clawback or not. And it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a possibility that you don't need a clawback because the audit's done first. But I'm just wondering what happens if there's something, a discrepancy or a problem that happens after the audit's done. And in talking to staff, they reminded me that a lot of our statutes with audits still have the clawback provision. So I just want to know if there's a way we could add the clawback provision or put in a clawback provision so that if we find something out after the credits have been given out and sold, that we have a chance to recuperate some of that.
Eric Price from the Film Office. The way the program currently works is that after the production is complete, all costs have been incurred. That is then audited by an independent CPA approved and licensed in the state of Nevada. When the audit has been completed, the certificate of transferable tax credits is then issued. Typically, that production will then transfer that to a local Nevada buyer who will purchase the credits and then apply them on their particular return, whether that be one of the approved taxes, gaming, insurance, or modified business tax. And so there is no clawback provision because of the protections in place from the independent CPA audit. I'm not sure how the other incentive programs work that have audits with clawback provisions. The clawback of a provision after the audit's been complete I don't know what would come to light that would change it, because the audit is designed to catch all that, and the application of a subsequent clawback provision may affect our ability to attract the productions in the first place if there is a risk that something could be clawed back after a audit has been completed and credits have been issued.
Kim Spurgeon, for the record, if I could jump in here. I have the law pulled up in front of me, and I'm not sure it's in the AB 20 that you have. I compared the two, and I don't see it in there. NRS NRS.7597, repayment amount of credit required under certain circumstances. That NRS does allow, if a production company is found to have submitted any false statement, representation, or certification in any document submitted for the purpose of obtaining transferable tax credits, or who otherwise becomes ineligible for transferable tax credits after receiving the transferable tax credits, they shall repay to the Department of Taxation or Gaming Control Board, as applicable, any portion of the transferable tax credits to which the production company is not entitled. If that transferable tax credit was purchased by someone and not used by the production company, but someone who bought the credit, the transferee is not liable for repaying that. If it's purchased in good faith, the transferee is not subject to forfeiture, just the production who applied.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess, yeah. So with that, I want to move on to, sorry, I've got a very well written up bill that's notes on it. The provision on if there, oh, okay. So on page 8 in section 4, at the very bottom, line 45, so it's 4 sub 4 B2, 1 and 2, the production company violating any state or local law. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a threshold for that? You know, if someone's in the production is driving the production van and gets a speeding ticket, is that enough? Or can we put some kind of guidelines on that of what violates any state or local law, where that starts?
Eric Price, our intention with this is not to penalize the production or to not provide tax credits, but to protect the local crew and employees and businesses that are working on the production. So it is not our intent to use this punitively. It says that the office may withhold that. This is mainly to protect vendors who maybe were not paid or were not had contract disputes with a vendor or damages were done. It's not meant to be punitive, but meant to protect the small businesses in Nevada that work on these productions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. But I just want to make sure we're clear. So we've got a clear legislative history. I believe we have another question from Assemblywoman Benias Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's real quick, but I think it's probably my favorite part of this bill, which is this changing the shall to the may in terms of giving your office more discretion in the approval of what is a qualified project. And I guess for the record, could you talk a little bit about how you imagine things look going forward with that change? Do you imagine that you would be able to, because with a shall, I'm thinking of like, you got to approve them as they come in, and without any discretion, there might be a project that is coming in that you'd rather reserve credits for, that's a much better deal for Nevada than something that just got handed to you and you have a shall. So I guess, can you talk a little bit about how this is going to change the workings of the offices, or what we might see with this language change?
Thank you, Eric Price. The rationale between this change was that we do have a small program currently with 10 million available per year, and it's very likely that we could be in a situation where we have multiple applications at the same time that push us over the limit, and we do have to make a decision. So by changing it from shall to may gives us a little more flexibility in that area. Again, our desire is to approve productions that benefit the state of Nevada, our small businesses, and our local industry here. So we're not looking forward to saying no, but gives us a little bit of flexibility when we are forced to make a decision.
Thanks. If I could ask, has that been a scenario that you've encountered frequently with the office?
We have not, Eric Price, we have not had to incur that, but due to the small nature of our program, we foresee it as being a potential issue in the future.
And Michael Brown, Executive Director, for the record, Madam Chair and Leader, that was also inspired by a conversation that we had about making sure that we understand that there has to be some level of discretion. This is not an entitlement program.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think I have any other questions. Let me double check. Oh, I don't think I have any other questions. Let me check. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to open this up for support. So BPS, can you please open up the phone lines for support?
Hello. To testify in support of AB 20, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. The caller with the last three digits 018, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is George Ross, GeorgeRoss, speaking on behalf of LBGEA, the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. LBGEA strongly supports the changes to the film credit program contained in AB 20. They reflect the lessons that have been learned over the last 10 years, and hopefully will make it a even more successful program. Particularly, some of those items have just been noticed in the questioning, such as the use of the word may, the ability to build up an inventory, and the extension of the auditing time to a more practical period. So we strongly urge you to support this program because, along with a lot of other things we're trying to do, it'll help the economy of Southern Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Do we have anyone else for support?
Yes, with the caller with the last three digits 081, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Dylan Keith, and I'm the Government Affairs Analyst for the Vegas Chamber. The Vegas Chamber has been in support of film tax credits the last several sessions, and we are in support of clarifying language and expansion of different types of programs such as sporting that would qualify in Section 1. Thank you for your consideration, and I ask for your support on this bill.
Mr. Keith, I think we had some audio trouble as you were stating and spelling your name. So just for our secretary's sake and for the record, can you please just state your name again and who you're representing?
Absolutely. This is Dylan Keith, Keith. I'm the Government Affairs Analyst for the Vegas Chamber.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else on the line for support?
To testify in support of AB 20, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this moment, we do not have any more callers in support of AB 20.
Thank you. With that, let's move on to opposition, please.
To testify in opposition to AB 20, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last three digits, 421, please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
This is Alfredo, ALFREDO, Alonso, ALONSO, with Lewis and Roca, today on behalf of UFC Endeavor. And I think our position is actually very supportive in most of the areas. I think the concerns we have, we'd like to be able to have a conversation regarding both the sporting event section and the pageant. And the reason being is the way E is written, where we're basically saying without limitation, the pre-show and post-show could actually negate some really important content that if you've looked at if you've ever watched a Super Bowl or a championship game of any kind, but any of the leagues, you know that there's a ton of content on the front end, on the back end. Oftentimes they're biopics on players. Many times, for instance, you would have a situation where you might have a biopic on, say, Tom Brady. And if you've got a Super Bowl in Las Vegas, we'd be prevented from doing that type of content. I think that's important because these could be, again, consistent with other parts of the statute already, but unwillingly we'd be taking them out of play. I don't know if you've ever seen some of those, but they basically do a 5-minute production on a player, and then you may see that later in a full documentary. I think the state would be better off having those types of programming. With respect to the pageant, I understand that the policy has been to keep tabs on galas and award shows, but the pageant is, I think, a different animal. I know that there's obviously not everyone agrees with the concept, but you look at something like Miss Universe, that is a international reach of over 500 million people. That's exactly, I think, what you're looking for Las Vegas in terms of the advertising side of it, which is, I think, very important as you look at this type of event. And they normally last a full week, so you've got all the content that goes with that. So it's not just a show, it's not just an award show for one night, it's an event. And I think that's important to remember, that most of these pageants would probably never meet the spend requirements anyway. So I would tell you that there's probably one or two that would, and this is one. And so perhaps having that conversation as to how we can distinguish some of these from each other and perhaps allow some of that content that is not sporting event related necessarily. I totally get the fact that they want to get sportscast and newscast type related events out. That makes perfect sense. But I think you want to have some flexibility. And again, as was discussed earlier, I think the discretion piece is going to help with that as well, because you are going to be able to choose some of the better events, some of the better content, and it would make complete sense to add some of that back in if possible. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso. I don't think we have any, but I'll encourage the committee to reach out to you if they do have any questions later on. Is there anyone else in opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
To testify in opposition to AB 20, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it does not appear that we have any more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Can we please have anyone in neutral?
To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 20, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits 048 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. Stephen with a V, Cohen as in Madam Chair. Just briefly, with the sake of time, in light of the SIA controversy that kind of went viral around Thanksgiving and then rehashed itself a couple of, I would love to see a disability talent preference somehow worked into this. Happy to work with the agency and/or committee to accomplish that. With that, thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Do we have anyone else in neutral?
If you are calling to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 20, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this moment, it does not appear that we have any more callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Would the presenters, sorry? Okay. Would the presenters like to come forward and make a closing remarks? Director Brown, Director Price?
I would just say thank you for hearing us today. You know, in Congress, they often put a date for legislation to be reauthorized. While that might not be common in Nevada, and this isn't a reauthorization, I did think it was just important to bring these issues forward and make sure that we have a modern statute. And we'd welcome any input. There's no urgency on this legislation. So, you know, if the committee wishes to take time to deliberate on it, there's no problem on our end. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Director. And I think we'd certainly also like to make sure that it's modern and up to date and gets the best bang for Nevada's buck. So with that, I will close out the hearing on AB 20 and open the meeting on AB 66, which revises provisions relating to the abatement of certain taxes. Director Brown again. Director Brown, Executive GOED, please go ahead and also please introduce your team who will be presenting.
Melanie Sheldon, Michael Brown for the record. Melanie Sheldon will be presenting on this, and Bob Potts, I believe, is with us, and Jimmy, who can also answer any questions. And I want to thank Eric and Kim. If they need to leave, they can do so and give us more bandwidth, but you're welcome to stay. So again, I asked my team to look at some of the issues where we could update. And one of the things I discovered was that some of our abatements that we had approved were taking a long time for the contract to be finalized, so long that we ended up, you could see personnel changes on both sides. And I just thought, you know, for all of the effort that we make in the recruitment process, in the review process, and by the way, the review of any abatements and incentives that we're doing now includes a cross-agency check with all the regulatory agencies in state government. And it includes a check with Good Jobs First for their national violators database, so that when we bring these companies forward, we have confidence that they're good corporate citizens. And we go through all of that, and then a contract is put together with GOED. And I was just discovering that these were stretching on forever. And I wasn't sure whether maybe some people were forum shopping, that now that they had their Nevada deal, you know, they were out shopping for another deal. And so I just said, you know, this can't go on. And so what we're proposing is a 1 year, you know, the contract's got to be put in place within 1 year. If a company were to bring an extenuating circumstance, we would certainly take that to the board if need be. And I'll let Melanie walk through it because, again, this revenue committee, this is very important, you know, for you all to understand, I believe, how these programs are working. And there's a lot of public interest in this, and we want to make sure that we're good stewards of these programs. And Melanie is a professional economic development officer in our Las Vegas office when it's open, although she's working from home. So Melanie, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Director Brown. Chairwoman Cohen and members of the Assembly Committee on Revenue, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Assembly Bill 66. For the record, my name is Melanie Sheldon. I'm the Director of Business Development South for the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. And I'm here today with my colleagues, Executive Director Michael Brown. I also have Deputy Directors Bob Potts and Chris Sanchez, Jimmy Hum, who is our Director of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs. And I'm also joined by my counterpart up north, Tatiana Vukovic, who is the Director of Business Development for the Northern Region. AB 66 is very much a cleanup bill, and it just adds some very specific and defined language to NRS 36750, which is the statute that governs abatements. As Director Brown said, this does shorten the timeline that a company will have to sign a contract with us. And just to give you a bit of background about why this bill is actually necessary, a company will file an application with GOED, and they will go in front of the board to be approved. Once they're approved, they enter into an abatement agreement or a contract with GOED, and the company is actually able to choose the effective date of that contract. We recommend to GOED that they align that with their hiring and purchasing schedule, obviously the business plan of the project. And the only stipulation currently in statute on that is the effective date cannot predate the day our office received the application. So just to give you an example, a company might be approved. For some reason, there is a time lapse. They haven't signed their contract. They may decide to come back and pursue that. And currently, as it's codified in statute, they could go back to the date we received the application, GOED received the application, despite whatever time had lapsed. And that can cause potentially a refund situation with the Department of Taxation. They actually administer the abatements. This is more proactive rather than reactive, especially in a time of fiscal uncertainty. We want to look for efficiencies. This is one we've identified. The possibility could exist for the company to apply that abated rate towards purchases and hiring that had been done at the full tax rate, and then they could receive a refund. And obviously, as I said, in a time of fiscal uncertainty, the state doesn't want to be offering refunds. As well, refunds, from what I hear, can be a laborious process. And so that also takes the Department of Taxation away from, or the audit team away from their core duties of performing the audit. So this is again to mitigate this. This was developed in close collaboration with the Department of Taxation, who are the audit team who work on this. This will make their job easier. It will free up resources, and it will also it will encourage companies to operate within GOED's policy of making a timely commitment to begin operations in Nevada as well as adhering to their contractual obligations. That's the only change that's being added to the statute, but it does seem like it's very hefty because it appears in a lot of places because it covers all the actual abatement packages that we have. I would be very happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My team's available to answer any questions. Like I say, Governor Sisolak asked me to tighten all of these programs up when I took this job. And, with all the fuss and feathers we go through to get one of these abatement packages through, I kind of expect the contract to get signed, put into place.
And excuse me, sorry, I should add that most companies I work with have a very aggressive timeline. They're very keen to get to Nevada, get started, get operations set up. So this is really not a common occurrence, but once again, it's certainly something that our agency would want to get in front of, and so would the Department of Taxation.
Thank you, Director Sheldon. That actually was one of my questions about how often does this happen? Has it happened where you felt there was forum shopping going on? What's happened to make you, feel the need not just to tighten this up, but to get a statutory fix to this?
It's not common at all, and the Department of Taxation have also confirmed with me that this is not a common occurrence for them. However, we work very closely with our Department of Taxation colleagues, and Director Brown has now commenced having quarterly meetings with them. So we've really started to look at issues on both sides or efficiencies or ways we can address this. And this is just an area that we identified as a group and realized there was something we could do about it.
Thank you. And can you, and I just want to be clear, you can show your presentation. I believe you had a presentation for this bill. You can show that if you'd like to.
Oh, thank you, Chair Cohen. I think I've covered most of the points, unless the group would like to see that presentation.
Okay. No, that's okay if you don't feel the need. Can you go through the refund situation? I know there's a concern about preventing refunds, but how do those refunds, can you go a little into how they occur in the first place and what that, give us a scenario of what that would look like?
Sure. So a company might be approved by GoEd, and then they'll have their contract sent to them within, or their draft contract for their signature within 5 to 7 days of the meeting. And then for whatever reason, there's a time lapse, there's a merger or acquisition, there's staff turnover, there's a change in a business plan, there's forum shopping. And so for whatever reason, that contract isn't signed, and then maybe a year passes and the company realizes they want to be in Nevada, and this whole time this is where they should have been. So they'll come back and say, well, we have this abatement and it was approved and we've done a bit of hiring and purchasing now, so we'd like to apply the abatement to that. And so they could go back to the date that we received their application that year prior and capture any hiring and purchasing had been done. And they've done that hiring and purchasing at the full tax rate. So then they could go and apply the abatement apply the abatement should they want to. And that's how the refund situation would occur.
So we'd be refunding back to the company.
That's correct. Yeah. Or we would be refunding the fully paid taxes, and then we'd be refunding the abated amount. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, committee, do we have any questions? Vice Chair Benitez-Thompson.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And so that's so interesting. I think with the life of GoEd as we go through the program, it's so interesting what you hear, what the office encounters, because what we envision as legislators and what might play out is always so different sometimes than what plays out in reality on the ground. And I know none of us ever envisioned writing the statute in a way that would allow for people to kind of drag their feet and get a refund. I would say that is nowhere in legislative intent. So I do appreciate this. And I like it that it's kind of a 1 year use or lose it. Like here's the deal. And in any negotiation, there's typically an end date. So it just makes a lot of sense, and it's long overdue. I appreciate that. I guess what I was also thinking was then in order to make sure that we built all of these abatement programs a little bit differently, right? So if I think I remember correctly, within the Tesla statute and the Faraday statute, there were benchmarks on investments, and those benchmarks then dictated whether or not you got the abatement. And we don't necessarily tend to have that in the 360.750 chapters. We kind of give them like use 2 years or 50 employees within the 8 quarters. So I guess from what you've seen, would it make more sense to kind of look at benchmarking some of those investments in order to prevent?
Yeah, Madam Chair and leader and members of the committee, Michael Brown, the Tesla was a truly exceptional, one-off legislatively approved, situation. I'm not sure that these standard abatements cover a whole variety of companies. And at this point, I haven't seen anything in that would necessitate that. My frustration was born out of, when I was in the private sector and I got a permit from the government, I went and we started the next day. We went on with it. And I just did not understand what was going on here. And it was quite frustrating to the folks at the Department of Taxation, who really, this is not what they're doing full time. This is a collateral responsibility that they pick up. And so it was also easing the burden over there. But I don't know that I'd want to get into the existing abatements without knowing a lot more than I have. I understand, though, why the legislature wisely did that with the large package for Tesla and the larger package for Faraday that didn't come to fruition.
Thanks, and I appreciate that. And I know we can't do anything about the deals that are done. I was just thinking if it made sense on some of these other ones to look at it, but I'll let you guys tell me that. And so I think if I'm correct, looking at the entire bill, you cover through the general economic abatements, you're adding this into the data centers, you're adding it through the 372 now.
Yes.
Into 372, which is...
Yes, so Madam Chair and Leader, I'll tell you, when we did this, I thought it was a simple amendment. And then when I got it back from LCB, I sent it to the printer, and I thought I was going to have to buy more ink for the inkjet because it was so spread out in so many different parts of the code.
Yeah, and then I see that it references the 200 statutes in like section 9. Like I kind of thought that it might be drafted where you've got the 200 statutes and then the 300 statutes, but the 200 statutes are at the back. So you do grab those too. I see. Okay.
Madam Chair, we owe flowers to the LCB lawyer that spent the time to trace that all the way through the code.
Vice Chair, anything else?
And Madam Chair, Michael Brown, for the record, again, there's not an urgency on this. When you're prepared to move it, we're prepared to help you with it. But there's nothing that says we need this straight off.
Thank you, Director Brown. I do want to confirm something, though. The Vice Chair mentioned use it or lose it, and I just want to make sure. I don't know where it was, but I think it's not just that it's a year and then you're done. It's a year and you have to reapply.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You would go, your application would be considered stale and your approval would, and you would go back in front of the board.
Yes, and Madam Chair, and members of the committee, when we've done one of these deals and 3 constitutional officers and 3 cabinet members and 3 private citizens have sat there and reviewed it, I want to get on with it because I've got other things we need to go do,
Right, certainly that's understandable, Director. Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, and Director, do you have anyone else as part of your presentation that you'd like to have speak?
No, thank you. No.
Okay.
Appreciate you hearing us out today. Like I say, these are sensitive issues, and on my appointment, they were marked as issues where I needed to spend time and attention to, and we want to respond to the public sensitivity on these matters.
Well, again, we certainly appreciate you and your team looking out to making sure that Nevada gets the best bang for its buck. So with that, we're going to move on to support.
Hello, to testify in support of AB 66, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits 081 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is Dylan Keith, Keith, with the Vegas Chamber. We are in proud support of this bill, and we urge your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. Next person in support, please.
This is George Ross. G-E-R-E-R-O-S-S, speaking on behalf of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. Global Economic Alliance strongly supports AB 66. In particular, as many of you have pointed out already, it helps encourage the recipients to get on with their project, number one, and number two, definitely will inhibit forum shopping. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there anyone else in support?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 66, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it does not look as if we have any more callers in support of AB 66 at this time.
Thank you. And neutral.
To testify in neutral of Assembly Bill 66, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this moment, it does not appear we have any callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I think we got to opposition and there was no one there, but I just want to double check. Did we check opposition?
I will try one more time. To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 66, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 414, please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, Madam Chair. Bill Stanley for the record, representing the Southern Nevada Building Trades Union. I would first like to apologize for Mr. Brown for not following decorum and having this discussion with him prior to the hearing of the bill. But at this point, with the rules established by the chair, we would support an amendment to this bill. So therefore, we would at this point be required to testify in opposition to the bill. What we're looking for is some provisions in this bill that would tie these projects when they include construction work, repair, or modernization to include provisions of NRS 338.013 to 338.090, much of what we saw in AB 190 from the 2019 session of the legislature, whereby we can be assured that the area standards and the prevailing wage are paid when tax dollars are being abated for construction work. We have a project here in Southern Nevada, specifically at Air Liquide, of which I have talked with Director Brown about, was a project that was abated. Tax abatements were issued under the previous administration that is just now getting around to being constructed. We have numerous problems on that job site regarding local contractors, local hire provisions, apprenticeship opportunities, and the area standard wages being paid on this project. We believe that when our tax dollars are being spent or abated in this fashion, that the area standards and local opportunity and local hire provision ought to be considered. And so with that, Madam Chairman, I will again apologize to Mr. Brown and his team for not having brought this to his attention prior to the bill being heard today, but I hope that we can have some conversations in the near future before the bill comes back for a work session. And, we're all trying to navigate this new world that we're living in here, and I too am trying to do that. Usually we're all in Carson City, and I can walk down the street and have these conversations, and it's a little awkward now, but I do apologize for my tardiness and not following proper decorum, Madam Chairman. So with that, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. And I'm sorry, I guess I almost missed your testimony and encourage you to follow up with the director as we continue to work on with the bill. Is there anyone else in opposition?
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. So with that, well, I guess if you could just double check neutral one more time, just in case, because I messed up the order.
Of course. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 66, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this time, there are no more callers in neutral to speak.
Thank you. So with that, I'll ask Director Sheldon and Director Brown to, if you'd like to come back up and make some closing remarks.
Madam Chair, these are awkward times in these conditions, and I will reach out to Mr. Stanley and we'll have a conversation and we'll come back to the committee. And I thank you for the opportunity today, and thank you for the kind words about GoEd. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to reach out to Mr. Stanley. Director Sheldon, anything else?
Chair Cohen, Melanie Sheldon for the record. Thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated. Nothing else for the record.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I will bring a close to the hearing on AB 66. We'll now move on to public comment. As a reminder, public comment may be limited on based on the number of participants. Do we have anyone for public comment right now?
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay, let's just give them a moment in case we have any late additions. Okay, with that, do we have any comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none, our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 23rd at 4 p.m. And that concludes our meeting for today. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.